The client first run to substitute on purpose. The client first run to substitute on purpose with you in the safety of therapy room and realize that realize that he has nothing to fear. With your guidance, the client first learned that to stutter on purpose with you in the safety of the therapy room and realize that he has nothing to fear. He will learn that. Voluntary stuttering frees him. Voluntary stuttering frees him from the need to be perfectly fluent. Perfectly fluent. He will learn that voluntary stuttering frees him from the need to be perfectly fluent and enables him to use enables him to use easier stutter. He will learn that voluntary stuttering frees him from the need to be perfectly fluent and enables him to use easier stutter because he is less tense. Because he is less tense and no longer feels a need. No longer feels a need to avoid stuttering. Because he is less tense and he is less tense and no longer feels a need. No longer feels a need to avoid stuttering. To avoid stuttering. He will learn that. He will learn that. He will learn that. Voluntary stuttering frees him from the need to be fluent, to be perfectly fluent, and enables him to use easier stutter because he is less tense and no longer feels to avoid stuttering. No longer feels a need. No longer feels a need. No longer feels a need to avoid stuttering. The success of this process depends a great deal on the clinician being comfortable with stuttering. The success of this process depends on a great deal. The clinician clinician being comfortable with the stuttering. Thus, clinicians need to desensitize themselves to stuttering, to stuttering. Clinicians need to desensitize themselves to stuttering by practicing voluntary stuttering. By practicing voluntary stuttering. Voluntary stuttering. Until the experience of voluntary stuttering, the experience of voluntary stuttering, the experience of voluntary stuttering, and the experience of negative listen action. The experience of negative listen action. Negative listen action. Negative listen action. Listen action. Do not bother him. Do not bother him. Thus, the clinician need to desensitize themselves to stuttering by practicing voluntary stuttering until the experience of voluntary stuttering and the experience of negative listening action do not bother him. Do not bother him. After after explaining the rationale behind voluntary stuttering, I teach clients how to stutter voluntarily. How to stutter voluntarily. First, I model the sort of catch and release. I model the sort of catch and release. I model the sort of catch and release that we have working on, remaining calm and relaxed. Then I encourage the client to attempt some voluntary stuttering on words he would typically not stutter on. Words that he would typically not stutter on, using the catch and release style of easy stuttering. If he comes close, if he comes close, I enthusiastically reinforce his effort. I enthusiastically reinforce his effort. If he finds this too difficult, however, I do it with him and have him shadow my voluntary stuttering using catch and release. With appropriate modeling and support, most people who stutter are able to do some voluntary stuttering within just one session. I continue. I continue giving the client lots of praise for his courage in doing something he may find difficult, and I am careful to point out that what he had been so fearful, what he had been he what had been so fearful at first. I continue giving the client lots of praise for his courage in doing something he may find difficult, and I am careful to point out that what had been so fearful at first, what had been so fearful at first, no longer seems so scary. The client become comfortable using voluntary stuttering with catch and release in the clinic. It's time for him to move out in the world. After the client becomes comfortable, using voluntary stuttering with catch and release in the clinic, it's time for him to move out into the world. Let me see. First, the client and I establish a hierarchy of situations in which he can use voluntary stuttering. First, the client and I establish a hierarchy of situations in which he can use voluntary stuttering. The clinician should always go into situation with the client. The clinician should always go into situation with the client and be the first to use voluntary stuttering during in the beginning step of the hierarchy. The clinician the clinicians should always go into situation situations with the client. With the client and be the first to use voluntary stuttering. To use voluntary stuttering. Be the first to use voluntary stuttering during the beginning step of the hierarchy. I ask him to rate my listeners on a scale. I ask him to rate my listeners on a scale that reflects a range of quality. 저라. 에어컨 끄자. 아우. For example, a 10 might be someone who laughs or looks away, and a 1 might be someone who is attentive and listens patiently, or you could reverse it. The client may want to continue using this rating system when it is his turn to practice voluntary stuttering as well, because it can count condition. All the emotions or feeling victimized and helpless. The client, the client may want to continue using this rating system when it is his turn to practice voluntary stuttering as well, because the client may want to continue. The client may want to continue using this rating system when it is his turn to practice voluntary stuttering as well, because it can count condition. It can count condition all the emotions of feeling victimized and helpless. Clearly, when you are in the position of evaluate. Clearly, when you are in the position of evaluating someone else. When you are in the position of evaluating someone else, the power dynamic has changed. The power dynamic has changed. The power dynamic has changed in favor of evaluate. Clearly, when you are in the position of evaluating someone, the power dynamic has changed in favor of the evaluate. The power dynamic. clearly when you are in the position of evaluating someone else. Someone else. Someone else. The power dynamic has changed in favor of the evaluate. The power dynamic has changed in favor of evaluate. I voluntarily stutter in situation. I voluntarily stutter in situations such as asking directions from strangers or getting information from store clerk and remain calm as I do it. I voluntarily stutter in situation. I voluntarily stutter in situations such as ask directions from strangers or getting information from store clerk, and I remain calm. 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 I remain calm as I do it. I remain calm as I do it. If all of my listeners are patient, if all of my listeners are patient and understanding. If all of if all of my listeners are patient and understanding, I ask the client to choose a listener for me. I ask the client to choose a listener for me whom he feels might be more difficult. After I have completed several of these, it is the client's turn to stutter voluntarily with strains. When we then continue to alternate turns, which provides additional count condition. Which provide additional count condition. Which provide additional count condition as the client as the client, as the client. We continue to alternate turns, which provide additional count conditioning. As the client and I compare our ratings of listeners and take turns choosing listener. Then we continue to alternate turns, which provide additional count condition as the client and I compare our rating of listeners and take turns choosing listener for each other. In time, in time, a client feeling feelings of assertiveness. A client's feelings of assertiveness and exploration usually increase. In time, a client's feelings of assertiveness. The client's feelings of assertiveness and exploration usually increases, which diminishes feelings of fear and avoidance. In time, a client's feeling of assertiveness and exploration usually increases, which diminishes feelings of fear and avoidance. In time, a client's feelings of assertiveness. A client's feelings of assertiveness and exploration increase, which diminishes feelings of fear and avoidance. I am careful. I am careful not to allow a client to get over his head. I am careful not to allow a client to get in over his head. Over his head. Over his head. Over his head. With the listeners who may be too difficult. I also lavish. I also lavish. I also lavish praise on each of the client attempts. I also lavish praise on each of the client attempts, acknowledging how difficult it can be, and to try to be sensitive. Try to be sensitive to how much they want to discuss each event. I am careful not to allow a client to get in over his head with a listener who may be too difficult. I also lavish praise on each of a client's attempts, acknowledging how difficult it can be, and try to be sensitive to how much he wanted to discuss each event. Apt good workout. Apt good workout with stir club. Apt good workout with a stir club. For example, I may suggest that we take a break for coffee or soda at the restaurant where 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 we can practice voluntary stuttering with the server and enjoy the counter conditioning effect. Enjoy the counter conditioning effect of having snack while doing something that was previously unpleasant. Where we can practice voluntary stuttering with the server and enjoy the counter conditioning effect of having a snack while doing something that was previously unpleasant. The client and I continue working together on voluntary stuttering until he feels comfortable. The client and I continue the client and I continue working together on voluntary stuttering until he feels comfortable. Then he walks his way through the rest of situation in his hierarchy, such as voluntary stuttering with friends and relatives on his own. The client and I continue working together on voluntary stuttering until he feels comfortable. Then he walks his way through the rest of the situation in his hierarchy, such as voluntary stuttering with friends and relatives on his own. He has to continue putting voluntary stuttering into his speech in each situation until his fear subsides before going on to the next situation. Alright. He has to continue putting voluntary stuttering into his speech in each situation until his fear subsides before going on to the next situation. He has to continue putting voluntary stuttering into his speech in each situation until his fear subsides before going on to the next situation. Right. I check. I check. I check. I check. I check. Client's progress. I check client's progress. I check client's progress during therapy session, commending them when they are successful while supporting, encourage and counseling them when they run into problems. I check client's progress during therapy session, commending them when they are successful while supporting, encouraging and counseling them when they run into problems. Voluntary stuttering is a procedure that client will continue to use throughout active treatment and maintenance. Voluntary stuttering is a procedure that client will continue to use throughout active treatment and maintenance. Voluntary stuttering is a procedure that client will continue to use throughout active treatment and maintenance. Thank you.